What if the most dangerous weapon in the Strait of Hormuz right now is not the mines on the seabed? What if the mines were never the real story? What if the mines were always the distraction, and the actual weapon, the one that has Pentagon planners genuinely losing sleep, is something that has not yet fired a single shot? That is not a metaphor. That is not speculation. That is the operational assessment that intelligence analysts, Western naval planners, and regional defense officials are quietly converging on in the briefings.
The Iranian Navy fired anti-ship cruise missiles from coastal batteries at the American aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln. Apparently, the Iranians had received information that it was approaching their coastline again. Previously, when the carrier came within about 350 kilometers after the launch of missiles,
Because the mines were the opening move. The mines were the pressure. The mines were what the world was meant to see. The submarines are what the world was not meant to see. And right now, somewhere in the contested waters between Bandar Abbas and the Omani coast, a fleet of vessels that the United States Navy cannot fully account for is changing the strategic calculus of the entire Persian Gulf. Are decoded before the headlines catch up. Subscribe, hit the bell, and stay locked in, because what we are about to walk through is not a story about boats. This is a story about the most asymmetric naval threat the modern world has produced, and it gets worse the deeper you go. Why submarines beat carriers in Hormuz. To understand why Iran's submarine force matters more than any single mine on the seabed, you first need to understand the geography that built this problem. The Strait of Hormuz is not a deep ocean. It is a shallow, congested, sonar-hostile body of water that averages less than 100 meters in depth across most of its width. The narrowest stretch of the navigable shipping lanes is roughly 21 miles across, but the militarily significant water, the water where vessels can hide, maneuver, and lay weapons, is far more constrained than that. This is not the open Atlantic, where a Virginia-class attack submarine can run silent at depth and disappear into a thermal layer for weeks at a time. This is a confined, cluttered, acoustically chaotic environment full of merchant traffic, fishing boats, oil platforms, thermal gradients caused by the meeting of Gulf and Indian Ocean waters, and a seabed that scatters sonar returns in ways that make submarine detection extraordinarily difficult, even for the most sophisticated anti-submarine warfare systems on Earth. Iran did not build its submarine force to challenge the United States Navy on the open ocean. Iran built its submarine force to win in exactly this environment, and only in this environment. And that is the part that almost no one outside of professional defense circles fully appreciates. Tehran's planners spent 4 decades studying the acoustic, geographic, and tactical specifics of the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, and they designed a fleet that is, in this water, on this seabed, in these conditions, genuinely formidable. The 3 layers of the Iranian submarine force. Now let us get into what that fleet actually is, because the public framing of Iran's submarines as a few old Russian boats is dangerously incomplete. According to assessments from the Nuclear Threat Initiative, the Institute for the Study of War, and multiple open-source naval intelligence trackers, Iran operates a submarine force of approximately 24 to 28 vessels, organized into 3 distinct tiers, each designed for a different operational role. The first tier is the heavy layer. 3 Tarik-class submarines, the Iranian designation for the Russian-built Project 877 Kilo-class. These are 74-meter diesel-electric attack submarines acquired from Moscow between 1992 and 1996, and they are by a significant margin the largest, deepest-running, and longest-endurance vessels in the Iranian inventory. The Kilo is sometimes called the Black Hole by NATO submariners because of how acoustically quiet it is when running on batteries. Recent open-source reporting indicates that at least one of these boats, the Tarik herself, has cycled in and out of dry dock at Bandar Abbas, and Western analysts have been carefully tracking which of the 3 Kilos are currently combat-capable and which are in extended maintenance. The second tier is the indigenous middle layer. This is the Fateh class, an Iranian-designed and Iranian-built diesel-electric submarine that displaces roughly 600 tons, runs to a stated operational depth of around 200 meters, and carries 4 533mm torpedo tubes capable of launching torpedoes, anti-ship cruise missiles, and naval mines. The Fateh is the boat that Iranian state media has paraded for years as proof of self-sufficient submarine construction, and behind the propaganda, it is in fact a credible, capable platform. Beyond the Fateh, Iran is reportedly developing the larger Basat class, a roughly 2,300-ton design intended to carry vertical launch cruise missiles. Although open-source assessments suggest the Basat program is still working through its construction and testing timeline. The third tier, and this is where the strategic picture becomes genuinely uncomfortable for Western planners, is the light layer, the Ghadir class, and the Nahang. These are the midget submarines, and they are the ones that matter most for what is happening in the Strait right now. The Ghadir problem. Think about this carefully. Iran operates roughly 23 Ghadir-class midget submarines. 23. The Ghadir is approximately 29 meters long, displaces around 120 tons, carries a crew of just over a dozen, and is purpose-built for the shallow, congested waters of the Persian Gulf. It is not designed to fight a United States carrier strike group in open ocean. It is designed to do exactly three things, and to do them in waters where larger vessels cannot effectively operate. It can launch lightweight torpedoes against commercial shipping. It can insert special operations divers covertly along hostile coastlines. And most critically for the current crisis, it can lay naval mines at night, in shallow water, against a seabed it knows intimately, in patterns that are extraordinarily difficult to detect, attribute, or preempt. Reporting from outlets including The Telegraph and Winnet News has been explicit about this capability. According to those assessments, the Ghadir fleet can lay dozens of mines across the strait without being detected, and Iran has spent 4 decades studying exactly the conditions in which to do it. The boats are small enough to operate in water where a Western nuclear submarine cannot follow. They are quiet enough on battery power to disappear into the acoustic clutter of merchant traffic. And they are numerous enough that even tracking a significant portion of the fleet at any given moment exceeds the surveillance bandwidth of the assets currently deployed in the region. Here's where it gets critical. The mine-clearing operation that Pentagon officials have described as a 6-month endeavor assumes a static minefield. It assumes the mines that are already on the seabed are the entire problem. But if even a fraction of the Ghadir fleet remains operational and unaccounted for, the minefield is not static. It is dynamic. It can be replenished. Every cleared corridor is the doctrine behind the boats. Now let us talk about the doctrine, because the doctrine is what separates a collection of submarines from a strategic weapon system. Iranian naval doctrine in the Strait of Hormuz is not built around fleet engagement. It is built around what Western analysts have come to call mosaic defense, a layered, distributed, redundant approach to denying access to a confined waterway through the cumulative effect of small, cheap, hard-to-find platforms acting in concert. The submarines are one layer. Anti-ship cruise missile batteries on the Iranian coast and on Keshem and Hormuz Islands are another. Fast attack craft operated by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, the parallel naval force that operates separately from the regular Iranian Navy, are a third. Drone swarms, both aerial and increasingly underwater, are a fourth. And the mines themselves are the fifth and most static layer. The doctrine is not new. It draws on lessons that Iranian planners extracted from the tanker war of the 1980s, from the 1988 Operation Praying Mantis engagement that destroyed much of Iran's surface fleet, and from decades of careful study of how the Soviets thought about denying NATO access to the Norwegian Sea and the Sea of Okhotsk during the Cold War. The historical parallel that defense academics most often cite is the German U-boat campaign of the Second World War, not because the platforms are comparable, but because the underlying principle is. A submarine force does not need to defeat the enemy navy. It needs only to make the cost of operating in contested water unacceptable to the commercial actors, who depend on that water for trade. That is the calculus. And it is a calculus that has been validated by every serious wargame Western analysts have run on a Hormuz closure scenario over the past 15 years. Provisional. Every verified clean square meter of seabed is clean only until the next moonless night. Why the world's best sonar cannot solve this. Here is the part that should stop you cold. The United States Navy has the most advanced anti-submarine warfare capability in human history. P-8 Poseidon Maritime Patrol Aircraft. Towed array sonar systems on Arleigh Burke destroyers. Virginia-class attack submarines that can hunt and kill enemy boats at ranges that Cold War planners would have considered science fiction, sound surveillance systems, autonomous underwater vehicles, helicopter-deployed dipping sonar, and in the Strait of Hormuz, a meaningful fraction of that capability is degraded by the geography itself. Shallow water anti-submarine warfare is one of the hardest tactical problems in modern naval operations. The thermal layers that submarines normally use to hide do not behave the same way in 60 meters of water as they do in 6,000. The acoustic returns from a sandy, debris-littered seabed scatter sonar pulses in ways that generate constant false contacts. The merchant traffic transiting the strait, hundreds of ships per day, generates an ambient noise floor that masks the signature of a small, battery-powered submarine running at 3 or 4 knots along the bottom. A Virginia-class submarine that can detect a Russian Yasin-class boat at extreme range in the deep North Atlantic may, in the cluttered acoustic environment of the Persian Gulf, be unable to reliably distinguish a stationary Ghadir from a sunken cargo container. The platform is not the problem. The water is the problem. This is exactly why intelligence assessments suggest that Iran's submarine force has not been comprehensively neutralized, despite the substantial Western naval presence in the region. Some Iranian submarine infrastructure has been struck. Bandar Abbas Naval Harbor has, according to satellite imagery and reporting from outlets including the BBC and the War Zone, sustained damage in recent operations, and at least one IRGC floating base was reportedly hit. But the boats themselves, the ones that were at sea or that surged out of port in the opening hours of the crisis, remain in the operational picture in ways that Western planners cannot fully resolve. The international dimension. Now widen the lens. The Iranian submarine fleet is not only a problem for the United States Navy, it is a problem for every country whose energy security depends on the strait, and the diplomatic response is revealing exactly how that exposure is calculated. Japan, which imports more than 85% of its crude oil from the Persian Gulf, has reportedly been pressing Washington for granular intelligence on the residual submarine threat, because Japanese insurers and Japanese shipping lines cannot make rational decisions about resuming Hormuz transits without an answer to the submarine question. South Korea is in the same position. India, which sources a substantial fraction of its crude from Gulf producers, is reportedly conducting its own quiet diplomatic outreach to Tehran in parallel to the public negotiations. China is the most strategically interesting player. Beijing imports roughly 40% of its crude oil from the Gulf, and a sustained Hormuz disruption damages China economically more than almost any other major power. Yet Chinese diplomatic posture has remained deliberately ambiguous. Analysts believe Beijing is calculating, not performing. The Chinese leadership is weighing the short-term cost of energy disruption against the longer-term strategic benefit of watching American naval power expend itself on a crisis that distracts Washington from the Indo-Pacific. That ambiguity is itself a signal. The absence of a forceful Chinese demand that Iran stand down its submarine fleet tells us something about how Beijing reads the value of this crisis to its own broader competition with the United States. Russia, for its part, has every incentive to see Hormuz disrupted. Higher oil prices benefit Moscow's wartime budget, and a distracted American Navy is a Russian strategic gain. The diplomatic ambiguity from Moscow is, in this case, not ambiguity at all. It is quiet satisfaction. The psychological layer. This is where we have to talk about the psychological dimension, because the submarine force is doing damage right now, even if not a single boat fires a single torpedo. Think about what an unaccounted-for submarine force actually does to the calculus of a tanker captain. A captain whose vessel is worth $400 million, whose cargo is worth another $200 million, whose insurance underwriter in London is reading the same intelligence assessments that Pentagon planners are reading, is being asked to sail through water where the country that laid the mines also operates a fleet of midget submarines whose current locations are unknown. That captain does not need to believe a torpedo is coming. That captain only needs to believe that a torpedo might be coming, and the insurer behind that captain does not need to believe an attack is likely. The insurer only needs to believe an attack is possible at a probability that exceeds what the premium can absorb. The threshold for paralysis is far lower than the threshold for actual conflict. The threat is the weapon. The uncertainty is the weapon. A submarine you cannot find is doing strategic work every hour it remains unfound. And there is a national identity layer underneath all of this that Western analysts sometimes miss. For Iran, the submarine force is not just a military instrument, it is a symbol of self-sufficient indigenous defense capability built under decades of sanctions. The Fateh program, the Ghadir program, the Besat program, these are programs that Iranian leadership has tied directly to the legitimacy of the Islamic Republic as a technologically sovereign state. Which means the boats are not just weapons, they are political objects. Their loss would be felt not only as a tactical setback, but as an ideological wound. And that affects the calculus around how aggressively Tehran is willing to deploy them and how much risk it is willing to absorb to preserve them. Deterrence, ambiguity, and the unanswered question. Here is where we have to acknowledge what we do not know, because not knowing is the heart of this story. Intelligence assessments suggest, but do not confirm, that a meaningful portion of Iran's operational submarine fleet remains at sea. Sources indicate, but do not prove, that some Ghadir-class boats may have surged from secondary basing at Jask and along the Makran coast in the opening days of the crisis. Analysts believe, but cannot demonstrate publicly, that the Tariq-class kilos in operational status are positioned to threaten the southern approaches to the strait in the event of escalation. That uncertainty is not a failure of reporting. That uncertainty is the operational reality. And it is in that uncertainty that Iranian deterrence actually lives. The classical theory of deterrence holds that a weapon deters most effectively when its capability is demonstrated and its use is critically threatened. Iranian submarine doctrine inverts that. that possibility, hunting down every last one of the shadows of the Gulf, is higher than any rational adversary would be. What comes next? So what comes next? The honest answer is that no one fully knows.
Hey
And the
guys,
people in the best
today
position
we're
to
diving
know
deep,
are the ones being
literally
most careful
into the
about
water.
what they say
We're
publicly.
heading beneath the
Mine
surface to
clearance
meet
operations
something
will
mysterious.
Coalition
Ghadir.
naval assets will
It's
continue
small,
to flow into the
quiet,
region. Anti-submarine
deadly,
warfare
a
patrols,
true
both
ghost
surface
in
and
the
airborne,
Gulf.
will intensify
Stick with
in
me.
the operational
We're
waters around
uncovering
the Strait.
secrets they
Some
rarely
Iranian
talk
submarines
about.
will likely be detected,
If you think
tracked,
small
and
means
in some
weak,
cases
you're
neutralized
seriously
in the weeks
mistaken
ahead.
here.
But the fundamental asymmetry
Ghadir
will not
proves
disappear,
it's not the
because
size,
asymmetry
it's
is
the
geographic,
purpose behind
not
it.
technological.
In the Persian
As long as
Gulf,
the Strait of Hormuz
danger
remains
hides
shallow,
quietly
congested,
beneath
and
each
acoustically
wave.
hostile.
So
And as
sit
long as
tight.
Iran retains
We're
even a
going
fraction
full
of its midget
stealth mode
submarine
together
fleet, the
now.
threat persists.
In this
The diplomatic
episode,
track is
we'll
constrained
explore
by the
how
same problem
Ghadir
we
was
identified
made.
in our previous
We'll
briefing
break
on
down
Hormuz.
its specs,
Tehran's leverage in
simple,
any negotiation
tactical,
depends on
and
its
highly
ability to credibly
effective.
promise an end to
We'll
the
look
threat.
at its
But
weapons,
if a portion
its
of the Ghadir
missions,
fleet is
and its
operating under
edge.
devolved command authority,
And I promise,
if local
no
IRGC
boring
commanders
bits,
have latitude
just
that
real
central
deal
naval
stealth
command cannot
tech.
fully revoke.
Stay with
And
me,
even a
because this
sincere
ride
diplomatic
only gets
agreement at the
cooler.
national level
From
may not
torpedo
translate
launches
cleanly
to
into
sneaking
operational
past
standard
enemy
at the local
destroyers
level. That is
undetected.
a problem that
The
diplomats
world
are
of
not going to
mini-subs
solve.
is like a
And it is a
thriller
problem
movie.
that may shape the
Except
trajectory of
this
this
one's
crisis
real,
more than any
dangerous,
agreement signed
and
in
right underfoot.
The question everyone
So what
is
is
asking
Ghadir?
whether the Iranian
A
submarine
lightweight,
fleet is the deterrent that
quiet
ends this crisis
Iranian
on Tehran's
submarine,
terms, or
built
the weapon
specifically
system that
for
drags it
shallow
into a war
waters,
no one in
like the
Tehran
narrow
actually
strait.
wants.
It
The honest
sneaks,
assessment is that we
strikes,
do not yet
and
know.
vanishes
What we do
before
know is that
anyone
force
knows
that the
it's
world
there.
spent decades
It's
underestimating is now
compact,
sitting in
but
the
packs
most
serious
strategically important
firepower
waterway on
for
Earth.
its size.
And the assumptions that Western
Back in the
planners built their Gulf
2000s,
strategy around are
Iran
being
needed a
revised in
smarter
real time.
sea defense.
So here's what we want to hear from
Big
you.
submarines
Do you think the
struggled in
Iranian
the
submarine
Gulf's
fleet is
shallow,
functioning
salty
as a genuine
terrain,
deterrent right now?
so they went
Or do you
small,
think it is being held back
faster,
only because Tehran
cheaper,
has lost
and better
confidence
for
in its
stealth.
ability to control the
With North
escalation
Korea's
any
help,
submarine
they
engagement will
created
trigger?
Ghadir's
Drop your
base
reading in
frame.
the comments. Your
The
perspective
initial
genuinely
design
matters
was
to this
based on
conversation
North
because the
Korea's
people watching
Yono
this channel
class,
are the ones
but
thinking
Iran
about these
customized
questions
it,
at a level
improved
mainstream
it,
coverage
made
simply
it
does not
native.
reach. If
The
this
first
briefing gave you
Ghadir
something that
entered
headlines did
service
not,
back in
sharing takes 2
2003.
seconds.
By
It helps us keep bringing you
2006,
this level of
production
analysis.
lines were running
Hit that
full
like
steam
button.
ahead.
Subscribe if
Over
you're not
20
already.
Ghadirs
Because we
have
are
been
tracking
built
this
and
story
fully
across
deployed.
multiple dimensions,
Most
and the next
operate
briefing is
out of
going to
Bandar
go even
Abbas
deeper
or the
into coalition
Makran
naval
coast.
response
They're
and
cheap
what it
to
tells
make,
us about
but
the
deadly
future
enough to
asymmetrical
scare
in
navies.
warfare.
They
This is
participate in
Professor
drills
Jang
and
Insight.
active
The boats
coastal
are-
defense
The water is
operations.
dark, and the story